Hello, and thank you for tuning into AI Storytime. Sit back and enjoy, alone at night. Sean parked his car in the garage, after a long day shift as a security guard. Sean typically worked the night shift but was covering the day shift as a co-worker had called in sick. Today had been busy with calls and following up on other incidents throughout the week. With all this work he had to stay a little later than a typical day shift would. Every other worker had left the building and the only people left in the buildings on campus were custodians, typically 1 or 2 per building. While sitting in the van, parked with the vehicle off, writing notes from the day in the security journal, he saw a figure at the other end through the corner of his eyes. He turned to look and see who it was. The figure slowly bent over and turned its head to make eye contact through the windows of the 5 vehicles between them. The garage was dimly lit and with the 5 dirty windows, the figure was just a black shape of a man that seemed to have a pointed hood on. Sean immediately jumped out of the van excited to say hi to the custodian, Delbert, a Native American man who was the custodian for the administration building. Sean and Delbert would often spend a few minutes each night chatting about life and had formed a bond over the past couple of weeks. As Sean jumped out of the van and started to call out to Delbert, he realized that there was no one there. Confused as he was sure he had seen someone, he shrugged it off and started to turn around. But as he started to turn, something strange stopped him in his tracks. The door at the opposite end of the garage where the mysterious figure had been seen, was a heavy grey door with a spring-like contraption to prevent door slamming that made anyone trying to open the door have to use a lot more force than a typical door. The door flew open like a feather. Sean was paralyzed for a moment as he couldn't process what he was witnessing. He didn't wait long before deciding to finish the journal tomorrow and get out of the garage now. Sean walked out of the garage and into the administration building where he would need to clock out. Everyone had left, and the lights were all off. Typically Sean would be coming into work at about this time and the custodian Delbert would be working in an area with lights on, but he was nowhere to be seen. Sean clocked out and headed home to his wife, their teenage son, and their pets, a cat and a dog. He attempted to brush off the events trying to give reasonable explanations for everything that had happened. "I saw a shadow," he said while driving his personal vehicle home. "No, it was just the dirt making a weird shape through all the dirty car windows," he said, assuring himself. "Then what about the door?" Sean asked himself. "Can't explain that, can you?" he argued. A few minutes of silence go by as he ponders. "Well," he said, speaking aloud like someone else was in the car listening. "Most doors on campus have handicap buttons, must have just been the button going on the fritz," he assured himself confidently. Sean made it home and felt he had solved the mystery and was not going to worry about it further. After all, Sean didn't believe in ghosts. He had heard many stories from friends and family, but not once did he witness anything. If Sean couldn't see it or feel it, must not have existed. He was always able to come up with a reason that would explain any weird incidences that occurred and were labeled as ghostly. Sean had the following day off, then it was back to his regular schedule. Sean was working his standard shift, the night shift as a security guard for the school campus. It was late, almost time for Sean to head home. He had to secure the high school and middle school, then he could type up his report and head home. As he walked down the long hall that connected the high school to the middle school, he felt a hot breath on his neck and the unmistakable feeling of being followed. He turned around but saw nothing. He shook his head and continued on his way, but the hot breath only got worse. The air had become chilly and Sean could see his breath in front of him through the beam of his flashlight. He tried to ignore it and continued his rounds, looking down dark hallways and into classrooms to make sure no one was in the building. Eventually, the feeling was too much, the hot breath on his neck, the extreme chill, and now the sound of someone breathing beside him. Sean decided the school was secure. There were a few more halls left but he had the urge to get out. He didn't believe in ghosts cause he couldn't see or feel them, but he could feel the hot breath, he could hear the breathing. He set the alarm for the building, went back to the office, and typed his report. Then he headed home. After everything that happened tonight, he still tried to explain it all to himself on his way home. Happy with his explanations, he crawled into bed with his wife after a snack. "Hey honey, how was your night?" his wife asked. "Good, glad I am home now," he replied. "Sweet dreams honey, we will talk more tomorrow?" Sean whispered to her as he kissed her cheek softly. Sean didn't tell anyone what had happened, thinking they would believe he was crazy, like he had thought of everyone else that told him ghost stories. The next few nights, the same thing happened. It seemed to escalate quicker and quicker each night. It was now Friday, and it was time to do the patrol through the high school and middle school. Sean was just here a little over an hour ago. Custodians were inside and the lights were on. Sean had no problems. He even had a small chat with the custodians before they headed out for the night. But this time Sean was alone. Custodians had left and the lights were off. The now typical occurrences were setting in, the cold air and the feeling of being stalked. Sean didn't make it halfway down the hall before he saw something. He saw a figure run across the hall in front of him. "What the hell? Who is that?" Sean said loudly with a stern voice. "This building is off limits at this time of night," he said as he rounded the corner. But nothing was there, just a dead end. Sean's breath was thick in the freezing night air and now his hairs were standing on end. The past couple of days had tested his beliefs. Were ghosts real? If not, what had he just witnessed? This was not explainable, not by Sean's typical method. He was starting to get scared, his heart was racing and it was time he got out of this damned building. As he headed towards the exit, that hot breath picked up in pace, the sound of someone breathing beside him also increased its pace. Sean heard something behind him. He didn't know what was following him, but he knew he didn't want to find out. He made it around the corner not looking back and walking briskly, almost at a jog. Sean got to the alarm and punched his code. As he started heading to the exit to get to the security truck, he saw something round the corner. He couldn't make out what it was but knew this is what has been following him. Sean started to run at this point to get to the exit. Red eyes from the corner ahead were going up and down like a horse's head bobbing while at a full sprint. Sean could hear the creature breathing, he could feel that hot breath on his neck, and both seemed to be in sync. Sean and this creature were on a collision path and Sean was determined to get to the exit. He screamed as he made a hard left turn, the alarm making its final ticks aloud as it counted down to 0 to arm. He hit the exit doors, with the creature behind him, ran to the vehicle which he had left running and sped back to the office, his heart racing. Sean parked in the garage, out of breath with the feeling that he had almost lost his life. He took a second in the truck to gather himself, then headed into the office and typed his report. The drive home was silent. He didn't say a word. What was there to say? There was no explaining this, and he knew no one would ever believe him. Sean pulled up in his driveway and got out of his car. Got to the chain-link fence and opened the gate. Mr. the cat, was outside the door waiting to go in. Sean bent down and picked him up, propping him on his shoulder. As Sean turned to close the fence gate behind him, Mr. fluffed up as if under attack. His claws sank into Sean's shoulder and he let out a terrifying hiss. Sean looked at the cat. Mr.'s eyes were huge and locked onto something or someone, but there was nothing there in front of the gate. Sean took a second to process the situation, the cat still defensive with his claws deep in his owner's shoulder. Sean calmly looked at the nothingness in front of the gate that the cat was still glaring at. "Whatever or whoever you are not welcome here," he said, voice cracking with fear. "This is my home, my family, and you are not a welcome addition in any sense." Sean said, his voice getting stern. "You will leave me, my family, and my home alone. I do not want to see or hear from you again." He spoke loudly with anger now be gone. He uttered as he turned to the door of his house. Sean walked in, shutting the door quickly behind him. He set the cat down on the couch and pet him. "That's a good kitty," he said, petting the Mr. Sean went to bed, and to his surprise, he had no further issues. Nothing happened over the weekend at his home, and when he went back to work, he had his first calm shift in a long time. No one knows what it was that followed Sean home that night, and no one wants to find out. Sean has told the story many times, and each time he has goosebumps over his entire body, as he relives the nightmare of that night. Some think Sean is crazy, and as time goes on Sean even wonders if it could have been explained. But in the end, he is just grateful that Mr. alerted him to the presence on that eerie night. The end. Hope you enjoyed.